Hello from Mindset Daily, wishing you a day full of health, peace, and happiness. Thank you for watching the Mindset Daily channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us. Thank you so much. What if the only thing standing between you and your dreams is your comfort zone? Have you ever wondered why motivation fades so quickly and how some people keep going long after it's gone? And here's the big one. What if the secret to success isn't inspiration, but the ability to force yourself forward when everything inside you says stop? Let's break it down. That phrase, force yourself, might sound a little harsh at first, right? Nobody wants to feel forced. But let me clarify. This isn't about someone yelling at you, pressuring you, or demanding action from the outside. No, this is a different kind of force, one that comes from within. It's the quiet, determined discipline to do what needs to be done, even when every fiber of your being wants to put it off, especially in those moments when you don't feel like doing it. That's when it matters most. Let me ask you something. How many times have you set a bold goal in January, only to watch it fade away by February? Be honest. I've been there too. We all have. And why does this happen so often? Because most of us haven't developed that internal drive, the ability to push ourselves beyond that initial burst of enthusiasm through the valley of discomfort and up the steep climb toward actual achievement. Here's the truth. Motivation is great for getting started, but it's not what keeps you going. That job belongs to habit. And habits? They don't take root without effort. They require that uncomfortable phase when you're forcing yourself to act against your own resistance. Our brains are wired for comfort. We're drawn to the familiar, the predictable, the safe. But here's the problem. Your biggest goals won't be found in that comfort zone. They live in the unknown, the risky, the uncomfortable. And if you're not willing to enter that space, you'll never reach them. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the journey has to be miserable. Quite the opposite. But I'm saying this. There will be moments, many moments, when comfort whispers to you, try to lure you away from your path. And in those moments, your ability to force yourself forward will be what shapes your future. Let me share a story. Years ago, I met a young man full of ambition. He had a vision. He wanted to build a business. His dreams were real and they were big. But every time life threw him a challenge, and in business, challenges are guaranteed, he pulled back. He'd retreat into comfort. He'd delay those tough decisions. He'd avoid the uncomfortable conversations. He kept delaying the hard tasks. So one day, I sat him down and said, here's the truth. You're letting your emotions run the show. But successful people, they let their goals drive their actions, and then they manage their feelings along the way. That simple insight hit him hard. It was the turning point. He realized he'd been waiting to feel confident, to feel prepared, to feel motivated. But here's the thing. Those feelings rarely come before the action. They usually show up after you've already taken that uncomfortable step. Confidence is built through progress, not perfection. Certainty grows through repetition, not hesitation. Now, let me walk you through a few key principles that will help you learn to force yourself to achieve any goal. These ideas aren't complicated, but they're life-changing if you actually apply them. First, define your goal with absolute clarity. A vague goal produces vague results. Saying, I want to be successful, is like aiming at a fog. What kind of success are you talking about? Financial? Physical? Emotional? And when do you want it? How will you know when you've reached it? Instead, get specific. Don't just say, I want to be financially secure. Say, I will have $50,000 saved in my account by December 31st of next year. Now that's specific. That's measurable. That's time-bound. That's a goal with weight and structure. Why does this matter when it comes to forcing yourself? Because when your goal is crystal clear, your motivation becomes sharper. You have something concrete to hold on to when your willpower starts to fade. When your alarm goes off at 5 a.m. and every cell in your body screams, stay in bed, A vague dream won't get you moving, but a specific goal with a hard deadline and real consequences for missing it will. Second, learn to associate massive pain with failure and massive pleasure with success. This is one of the core drivers of human behavior. Everything we do is to either avoid pain or gain pleasure. So use that power. When you imagine the cost of not achieving your goal, missed opportunities, regret, financial stress, wasted potential, it should sting. And when you envision the reward, freedom, confidence, peace of mind, it should light a fire in your soul. The deeper that emotional contrast, the stronger your drive will become to act, especially in difficult moments. We are biologically designed to avoid pain and pursue pleasure. That's simply how we're wired. So take a moment and ask yourself, what is the real cost of not reaching this goal? What would you be sacrificing? What opportunities would slip through your fingers? Who might you let down, including yourself? Let those questions sink in. Don't just think about them, feel them. Imagine that disappointment, that sense of regret, that future version of you looking back, wondering why you gave up. Make the pain real, personal, even uncomfortable. Then flip it. What do you stand to gain if you do achieve it? How will your life change? What doors will open? How proud will you feel? How will your success affect the people you love? Your spouse, your kids, your future. Picture that moment. Let that vision pull you forward with power. But here's the key. Don't let those emotions sit in the distance. Bring them into the present moment. When you're staring at that task you don't want to do, when you're reaching for the snooze button or thinking of putting it off until tomorrow, you have to connect that hesitation with pain. And you must connect taking immediate action with pleasure. That mental shift is how you start forcing yourself to follow through. I once spoke with a man who had battled weight issues for most of his life. He'd lose a few pounds, gain them back, then try again, each time ending in frustration. Nothing changed for years, but one conversation with his doctor changed everything. The doctor said, if you don't make a serious change now, you may not live long enough to see your grandchildren grow up. That hit him hard. The pain of not changing became immediate and deeply personal. And just as powerful, the vision of playing with his grandkids, watching them grow up, that became his fuel. The result? He lost 70 pounds and has kept it off for years. Not because of a better diet or a new workout, but because he linked massive pain to staying the same and massive pleasure to becoming the person he wanted to be. Now let's move to the third principle. Break your goal into smaller, manageable chunks. You've heard the old question, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's the same with any big goal. You must deconstruct your ambition into bite-sized actions. Why? Because forcing yourself to take one small step feels doable. For example, if your dream is to write a book, don't try to write the entire chapter today. Instead, focus on one page or even one paragraph. That's how momentum begins. That's how resistance gets chipped away. Forcing yourself to sit down and write an entire book in one day. That's overwhelming, even paralyzing. But forcing yourself to write just a single page, that's doable. I once met a woman who dreamed of earning her college degree, but her reality was anything but simple. She worked full-time, had 3 children, and a husband who worked the night shift. Her schedule was packed, her energy stretched thin. At first, the thought of pursuing a degree felt impossible. The big picture was intimidating, but when she broke it down into smaller pieces, just one assignment a day, it suddenly felt within reach. She stopped focusing on the mountain and started taking one step at a time. 4 years later, she walked proudly across that graduation stage, diploma in hand. Not because she made one giant leap, but because she kept showing up one assignment, one day, one small effort at a time. That brings us to the fourth principle: build accountability into your process. The truth is, most people struggle to force themselves into consistent action without some form of external accountability. We're social beings. Whether we admit it or not, we care about how we're perceived. We don't want to disappoint others or fall short in front of our peers. So why not use that to your advantage? Share your goal with someone you trust. Join a group of like-minded individuals pursuing similar goals. Hire a mentor or coach. Partner with an accountability buddy. When someone is expecting you to show up, take action and deliver, especially when you'd rather not. You'll find it easier to push through your resistance. I remember working with a group of ambitious entrepreneurs. We implemented a simple but powerful system. Each week, everyone stated clearly what they would accomplish by the next meeting. Then, at the start of the next session, they had to report back, publicly. No one wanted to be the one who didn't deliver. That subtle pressure, that desire to follow through in front of others, became the fuel that turned intentions into action. Now, here's the fifth principle. Track your progress. Because what gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed improves. If you don't know where you're going or how far you've come, how can you stay motivated? How can you hold yourself accountable? Tracking gives you feedback. It shines a light on your momentum or your lack of it. Either way, it wakes you up. I once worked with a client who wanted to make more sales calls. But like many people, he avoided them. Why? Rejection. It stings. So instead of focusing on the outcome of the calls, I told him to shift his attention. Just track the activity. I said, put a simple chart on your wall. Every time you make a call, put a check mark. No yayment. Just mark it. Then each day, try to beat your previous total. That small change rewired his behavior. Within a month, the hesitation was gone. He wasn't dreading the calls anymore. He was chasing that next tally. Progress became a game. Discipline turned into momentum. Why did it work so well? Because he shifted his focus from what he couldn't fully control, the results, to what he could control, his actions. That simple mental shift changed everything. It removed the emotional roller coaster tied to outcomes and gave him a daily target he could consistently hit. Now, let's move on to the sixth principle, mastering your emotional state. This, right here, may be the most critical skill when it comes to forcing yourself to achieve any goal. Your emotions will rise and fall. Some days you'll feel motivated, and other days you'll feel like doing absolutely nothing. That's completely normal. But here's the key. Your actions don't have to ride the same emotional waves. They can remain steady, consistent, grounded in purpose rather than mood. Learn to catch yourself in the act when you're hesitating, procrastinating, or just feeling off. Then use simple, intentional strategies to shift your state. Sometimes that might mean changing your body language. Stand tall, roll your shoulders back, take a deep breath, move. It might also mean shifting your focus from what's stressing you out to what you're grateful for in that moment. And sometimes it's the words you whisper to yourself that make the biggest difference. I once worked with an Olympic athlete who had a very specific ritual before every competition. No matter how tired, nervous, or unsure she felt, she would pause, stand firm, take several grounding breaths, and tell herself, I am ready. I am strong. I can do this. Did she always feel that way? Not at all. But by declaring it with confidence, she created a powerful emotional anchor. Her body responded, her mind followed, and she performed with purpose even on days she didn't feel ready. That leads us to the seventh principle. Build your discipline muscle through small, consistent wins. Think of discipline like a physical muscle. It grows stronger every time you use it. You don't start with a 300-pound bench press. You start with manageable weight and work your way up. It's no different with habits and behavior. Begin with small acts of self-discipline that are easy to implement but powerful in their momentum. Make your bed every morning without fail. Floss every night. Read 10 minutes of a good book before bed. These habits may seem trivial, but they lay the foundation for bigger, more demanding forms of discipline. I remember a man who always struggled with exercise. He tried intense workout plans before, but nothing stuck. So we changed the strategy. He committed to just 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes of push-ups, rain or shine, tired or not. And here's the beauty of it. Some days he went beyond 5 minutes, but he never did less. That commitment, that consistency became his breakthrough. After just 6 months of maintaining that tiny discipline, he had built up the strength, mentally and physically, to take on much more demanding workouts. That simple 5-minute habit laid the foundation. His discipline muscle had developed gradually, and now he was capable of pushing himself to new limits he once thought were out of reach. Now let's move on to the 8th principle, embracing discomfort as part of the process. In today's world, we've grown accustomed to seeking comfort in everything. Fast food, instant streaming, one-click shopping. We want it easy, quick, and painless. But here's a truth most people don't want to hear. Achieving anything truly meaningful almost never comes without discomfort. There will be moments when the work feels tough, when your progress is slow, when your energy dips. And you might wonder, shouldn't it feel easier if I'm on the right path? But the truth is that very discomfort is often the clearest sign you're growing. You're moving past the edge of what's familiar, stretching yourself into new territory. That pain, that pressure, it's not a problem. It's proof of progress. I once spoke with a marathon runner about how she dealt with hitting the wall, that infamous moment in a long race when your body begs you to quit. She said something simple yet powerful. I don't try to block out the pain. I acknowledge it. I say, yes, this hurts. And yes, I can handle it. That mindset of accepting the struggle instead of resisting it made all the difference. It didn't make the pain disappear, but it made it bearable, manageable. That mindset gave her strength. Which brings us to the 9th principle, harnessing the power of habits. Forcing yourself, especially in the beginning, is undeniably hard. But here's the magic. If you keep showing up long enough, what once required force starts to become second nature. Habits are the ultimate form of leverage. They allow you to act without wrestling with motivation every single day. The key is consistency. If you can push yourself daily, even when you don't feel like it, eventually the action becomes automatic. It may take 30 days. It may take 60, sometimes 90. But once it's locked in as a habit, you've created a long-term advantage that pays off again and again. I remember working with a writer who had a powerful story inside him, but he could never get himself to sit down and write. Every day it was a struggle. Distractions won. Procrastination won. He kept waiting for inspiration to strike or for his schedule to magically clear. Of course, that never happened. So we made a plan, just 20 minutes a day at the keyboard. No expectations. No pressure to write the perfect paragraph. Just sit down and write something. But he made a firm commitment. Every morning, before checking his email, the news, or social media, he would write for just 30 minutes. That was it. Just 30 minutes of focused effort. And after about 45 days, something remarkable happened. He no longer had to push himself to sit at the keyboard. Writing had become part of who he was. On the rare days he skipped, something fell off, like his rhythm was disrupted. Why? Because the habit had taken root. What once required force had become effortless. This brings us to the 10th principle. Surround yourself with the right influences. You've probably heard the quote before, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's one of my own, and it applies powerfully when it comes to learning how to force yourself into action. If your daily environment is filled with people who are disciplined, driven, and committed to their goals, then forcing yourself becomes significantly easier. You're carried by the current of ambition. But if you're surrounded by people who are lazy, distracted, and constantly chasing comfort, that current pulls you in the wrong direction. So, be brutally honest. Who are your 5? Are they helping you rise or holding you back? It's not just about people either. Be intentional with every influence in your life. Read books that fuel your inner fire. Listen to podcasts that sharpen your focus. Follow mentors who walk the talk. Build a world around you that makes success your default, not your exception. I remember one young man in particular. Ambitious, smart, full of potential. He was trying to launch a business while living with roommates who partied every night, stayed up late, and mocked his discipline. He told me it felt like trying to sprint through mud. Every step forward was a struggle. But once he changed his environment, moved out, found a quieter space, connected with like-minded people, everything shifted. His energy changed. His habits stuck. His business grew. His life changed. Now, let me be clear. These 10 principles aren't just motivational quotes to stick on a wall. They are real, tested strategies. They've been used by thousands of people, from athletes to entrepreneurs, to transform their lives. But here's the hard truth. Just knowing these principles isn't enough. You have to live them. You have to apply them, not once, but daily, again and again, until they become part of you. Discipline isn't magic. It's not something you either have or don't. It's the bridge between your goals and your achievements. And just like any bridge, it's built plank by plank, day by day. Some days, you'll feel energized. You'll leap out of bed, ready to crush your tasks. Other days, you'll drag your feet. You'll want to quit. And on those days, your ability to force yourself is the difference between progress and regret. But every single day you show up and do the work, that bridge of discipline becomes stronger. With each step, it supports more of your weight, your ambition, your vision. And here's the beautiful part. Forcing yourself doesn't stay hard forever. It gets easier, not overnight, but with practice. The first morning you drag yourself out of bed at 5 a.m. to chase your goal, it feels brutal. You're groggy, maybe even doubting yourself. The second time, still hard, but you know what's coming. And by the 30th time, it's simply a new normal. It's no longer something you try to do. It becomes part of who you are. Let me get personal with you. When I first started my journey in personal development, I had a secret fear. Public speaking. Just the thought of standing in front of an audience made my heart race and my palms sweat. It was almost paralyzing. But deep down, I understood that if I wanted to make an impact, if I truly wanted to help people grow, I couldn't avoid this. I had to confront it. So I forced myself. I joined Toastmasters. I said yes to every speaking opportunity, no matter how small or intimidating. I practiced in front of mirrors. I rehearsed with friends. I spoke in front of anyone who would listen. And trust me, not every experience was pretty. I lost my place mid-speech. My voice cracked. I even watched people in the audience glance at their watches, clearly bored. But I kept showing up. I kept stepping up to that podium, even when it scared me. And eventually, something incredible happened. Public speaking not only became easier, it became something I loved. I discovered I had a talent for connecting with people, for breaking down complex ideas into simple truths, and for inspiring others to take action. And none of that would have been possible if I hadn't forced myself through those first awkward, uncomfortable, discouraging moments. If I had backed down at the beginning, if I had waited until I felt ready, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation today. That brings me to something I know many of you are probably thinking right now. You're wondering, Jim, I've tried to force myself before. I've started strong, but always fall off track. What's the secret to staying consistent this time? That's a powerful question, and the answer lies in knowing the difference between motivation and commitment. Motivation is a feeling. Commitment is a decision. Feelings are fickle. They shift with the weather, your mood, or even how much sleep you got last night. But decisions, if you truly honor them, can shape your entire life. When you're feeling motivated, forcing yourself is easy. Everything feels possible, but motivation fades. It's like a hot bath. It feels great at first, but it doesn't stay warm forever. That's when commitment has to kick in. That's the moment when you say to yourself, It doesn't matter how I feel. I made a decision, and I'm going to honor it, no matter what. And coming up next, I'll share the key to building that kind of unshakable commitment. So stick with me. It's not about being perfect. It's about being persistent. It's about having the strength to recommit every time life throws you off course. Because let's face it, you will fall off track. We all do. But here's what separates those who succeed from those who don't. Committed people never let a slip turn into a slide. They catch themselves quickly. They don't wait until next week or next month to get back on track. They act now. I remember coaching a woman who was building her own consulting practice from scratch. She created a simple but powerful rule for herself. Make 5 prospecting calls every single day. Rain or shine. No excuses. One night, she got so buried in client work that she completely forgot. By the time she remembered, it was already 11 p.m. Now, most people would have said, "I'll just double up tomorrow." But not her. She picked up the phone at 11 p.m. and made all 5 calls. Why? Because for her, it wasn't just about the calls. It was about being the kind of person who follows through no matter what. It was about honoring her word to herself, even when no one else was watching. That's the real meaning of forcing yourself. It's not about sheer willpower all the time. It's about living with integrity, aligning your actions with your words with your goals, and your goals with your core values. When everything lines up like that, your discipline becomes a reflection of your identity. Now let's talk about something we all encounter when we chase meaningful goals: resistance. It always shows up. It's as reliable as gravity. And the bigger your goal, the stronger the resistance. That's why understanding it is so important. Resistance wears many masks. Sometimes it shows up as fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of success itself. Sometimes it creeps in as self-doubt, questioning your abilities, your plan, or even whether the goal is truly worth the effort. Other times, resistance is just pure comfort-seeking laziness. It's that voice that whispers, "Just relax. You've done enough. Take it easy." But here's the truth. Resistance isn't your enemy. It's your compass. It means you're stretching, growing, and moving into unfamiliar territory. It's your mind's way of saying, "We've never done this before." And that's a good thing. The problem isn't resistance. It's letting resistance win. And the way you defeat it is by recognizing it for what it truly is: a natural, predictable response to growth. Not a warning sign, not a stop sign, just a signal that you're stepping beyond your comfort zone. So what do you do when resistance shows up? You don't overthink it. You don't wait for it to go away. You move anyway. You take that first small action, and then another. That's how you build momentum. That's how you force yourself forward. Not in spite of resistance, but because of it. I once worked with a businessman who dreamed of expanding his company internationally. But every time he made a move in that direction, a wave of anxiety would wash over him. He'd lie awake at night, filled with what ifs. What if he failed? What if everything went wrong? That anxiety became his justification for staying still. Inaction felt safer than the fear of the unknown. When we sat down together, I helped him look at that anxiety from a different angle. Instead of viewing it as a warning sign telling him to stop, I asked him, what if this was actually a sign of growth? What if that anxious energy was really excitement in disguise? After all, the body reacts to both in very similar ways. A racing heart, sweaty palms, butterflies in the stomach. That single shift in perspective changed everything. He stopped interpreting his fear as a signal to retreat. Instead, he used it as a cue to lean in. He forced himself forward, not by eliminating the fear, but by reframing it. And that's something we all need to remember. It's often not our situation that holds us back. It's the way we interpret it. When you change the meaning you assign to a feeling or event, you change your ability to act. Suddenly, what once felt impossible starts to feel within reach. That's how powerful your mindset really is. Now, let's talk about something most people misunderstand: willpower. Many think that forcing yourself to take action is all about having strong willpower. And sure, willpower matters, but here's the catch. Willpower is a limited resource. The more you use it, the more it gets depleted. It's like a battery that drains with every decision and temptation you resist. So instead of relying solely on willpower, smart achievers build systems. Systems that reduce the need for willpower in the first place. They create routines, habits, and environments that support their goals automatically. Let's say you're trying to build the habit of working out in the morning. Don't expect to just wake up and feel like it. Set yourself up the night before. Lay your gym clothes by your bed. Set more than one alarm. Text a friend to meet you at the gym. Create a rule: no coffee until after the workout. These small systems remove friction. They make the desired action the easiest choice. I had a client, a salesman, who dreaded making cold calls. Every single day felt like a mental tug of war. So we built him a system too. Before he opened a single email or checked a voicemail, he had to start his calls. We placed his call list directly on top of his keyboard, so he physically couldn't work on anything else until he addressed it. He even put a sticky note on his screen that read, "No email until calls are done." To take it further, he instructed his assistant not to bring him his coffee until he had made at least 5 calls. What happened? He stopped relying on willpower and started relying on structure. That made all the difference. With all those systems in place, something remarkable happened. Forcing himself to take action became significantly easier. The friction lessened. The resistance weakened. It's as if the burden of discipline was being carried by the structure he'd built, rather than by sheer will alone. Now, let's explore something even deeper, something that influences your behavior more than strategy or motivation ever could: your identity. This is where true transformation begins. Why? Because the most powerful force in human behavior is our need to stay consistent with how we see ourselves. Your identity silently directs your decisions, your habits, your outcomes. So, think about it. If you view yourself as someone who's undisciplined or lazy, you'll unconsciously act in ways that match that image. You'll confirm it through your behavior. But flip the script. Define yourself as someone who is focused, determined, disciplined, and you'll naturally seek to live up to that. It's not just about what you do. It's about who you believe you are. Instead of saying, "I'm trying to work out more," say, "I'm an athlete in training." Instead of saying, "I'm trying to write a book," say, "I am a writer. I am an author." Then ask yourself, what would a writer do right now? What would an athlete do in this moment of hesitation? When your actions align with your identity, they feel less forced. You're not pushing against the current anymore. You're flowing with it. Let me tell you a story. There was a businessman I worked with who was smart and ambitious, but his lack of organization was holding him back. His desk looked like a paper tornado had hit it. His calendar? Pure caos. Missed deadlines were a regular thing. When I asked him how he saw himself, he just shrugged and said, "I'm not a details guy. That's just who I am." And there it was. The root of the problem. His identity was working against him. We started to shift that narrative. He began telling himself, "I'm becoming more organized every single day. Organization is now a part of who I am." Sure, it felt awkward at first. He didn't fully believe it yet. But as he took daily actions that matched that new identity, clearing his desk at the end of each workday, setting digital reminders, actually using his calendar, something shifted. The actions that once felt like a struggle began to feel natural. His identity evolved and his behavior followed. So remember, real change doesn't start with trying harder. It starts with thinking differently about who you are. Let's dive into a powerful concept that often flies under the radar, but can completely change how you approach your goals: the compound effect. This principle is simple, yet profound. Small, consistent actions, when repeated over time, create massive results. Whether it's in finances, fitness, personal growth, learning, or relationships, this truth holds strong. The beauty of the compound effect is that it helps you connect the dots between today's seemingly insignificant effort and tomorrow's extraordinary reward. When you truly understand the compound effect, it becomes easier to force yourself into action. Why? Because you stop seeing today's task as isolated and start seeing it as an investment, a seed planted that will grow over time. The discomfort you feel now becomes more bearable when you realize it's building a better version of your life down the line. I once worked with a real estate investor who dreamed of owning 50 rental properties. He had the vision, the ambition, but he couldn't bring himself to consistently take action. Scouting deals, submitting offers, negotiating, it all felt overwhelming. So I walked him through a mental exercise. We calculated the passive income from just one property. Then we projected the total monthly income from owning 50 properties. After that, we broke that monthly number down into a daily figure. The insight hit him like a lightning bolt. Every single day, he chose to procrastinate. He was losing a measurable amount of potential income. But every day he forced himself to act, he was essentially earning that amount. This shifted everything. What used to feel like a burden now looked like opportunity. His mindset evolved. Action no longer felt like a chore, but a smart investment in his future wealth. Now, let's pause and address a concern you might be having. Maybe you're thinking, Jim, forcing myself every single day sounds exhausting. Am I supposed to live this way forever? Always grinding, never relaxing, always pushing? That's a valid question. But here's the truth. Forcing yourself isn't the end goal, it's the bridge. It's a short-term strategy to help you get from inertia to momentum. Think about it like pushing a stalled car. At first, it takes a massive effort just to get the wheels rolling. But once you've built enough momentum, it becomes dramatically easier to keep it going. I remember talking to a successful CEO who reflected on his early days. He used to dread networking. Walking up to strangers at events, speaking up during meetings, it terrified him. But he forced himself through it time and time again. Eventually, those difficult actions became second nature. They didn't require force anymore. They had become habits, even sources of confidence. That's the ultimate payoff. You don't force yourself forever. You use discipline now to build systems, routines, and an identity that eventually do the heavy lifting for you. Now, he doesn't have to push himself anymore. In fact, he genuinely enjoys the very actions that used to feel like a burden. That's the beautiful paradox of discipline. What starts as force eventually transforms into flow. The more consistently you force yourself in the beginning, the less you need to later. Over time, those once difficult actions integrate into your identity. They stop being tasks and start becoming part of who you are. But there's a crucial caveat. To get to that effortless zone, you first have to break through the resistance wall. That means pushing through when everything in you wants to retreat. It means forcing yourself again and again until your brain accepts the new pattern and automates it. There's no shortcut, no hack, no secret technique to bypass this phase. It's a universal part of real change and personal transformation. Let's borrow a lesson from chemistry. Ever heard of activation energy? In chemical reactions, activation energy is the initial jolt of energy needed to get the reaction going. Once it starts, the reaction often becomes self-sustaining. The same logic applies to behavior. The hardest part isn't doing the work, it's starting. Getting out of bed when it's still dark outside. Sitting at your desk to start writing. Making that first cold call. These are moments that demand the highest level of inner force. But here's the encouraging part. Once you're in motion, the effort required to keep going drops significantly. That's why the just 5 minutes rule works so well. Tell yourself, I'll work out for 5 minutes. Or I'll write for 5 minutes. Or I'll just look over my business plan for 5 minutes. This small window lowers the psychological barrier. It reduces the resistance just enough for you to take the first step. And once you're in motion, continuing feels far less daunting than beginning. I remember coaching a writer who had been dreaming of publishing a book for years. He wasn't short on talent or ideas. What held him back was simply the act of starting. So we made a deal: write for just 10 minutes every morning, no matter what. That's it, 10 minutes, first thing, before email or distractions. That tiny shift changed everything. Once he got started, most mornings he'd write for an hour, sometimes 2. But it all began with that small act of forcing himself past the inertia. 3 years later, he's the proud author of 3 successful books. Why? Because he mastered the art of pushing through that first few minutes of resistance. Now let's move into another key factor that makes all of this possible: the role of purpose. Without purpose, forcing yourself feels empty. But with it, everything changes. When your goal is rooted in a deeper sense of purpose, something that reaches beyond the surface-level desires of earning money, gaining recognition, or proving your worth, then forcing yourself becomes significantly easier. Purpose acts as the emotional fuel that powers your discipline. It gives meaning to the struggle. And when you're clear on why you're doing something, when your why is powerful and personal, you'll find reserves of strength within yourself that you didn't even know existed. I once worked with a woman who dreamed of launching a nonprofit. She had a compelling vision of the impact it could make, but the day-to-day logistics overwhelmed her. The endless forms, the intimidating fundraising efforts, the challenge of building a solid team. It all felt like a mountain too steep to climb. Every morning, she had to summon enormous effort just to get started. Forcing herself to take even the smallest step became a daily battle. So I asked her one simple question: why does this matter to you? And that's when everything changed. She opened up about a deeply personal experience, how the issue at the heart of her nonprofit had touched her family in a painful, life-altering way. Her mission wasn't born from curiosity or ambition. It came from heartbreak. And it was this pain that had planted the seed of purpose within her. From that moment on, she did something powerful. She printed out photos of the people she wanted to help. She placed them on her desk where she'd see them first thing every day. She began each morning by reading her mission statement out loud. And suddenly, forcing herself became more than just pushing through tasks. It became an act of service, an expression of purpose. Yes, the paperwork remained tedious. Yes, fundraising still brought frustration. But those things no longer felt like obstacles. They were simply steps on the path towards something that truly mattered. Her sense of purpose made the pain feel smaller. And here's a truth worth remembering: discipline without direction becomes drudgery. If you're forcing yourself just for the sake of checking boxes or meeting arbitrary goals, you'll eventually feel drained and disconnected. But when that same discipline is fueled by something meaningful, by a mission, a calling, a reason that touches your soul, it becomes energizing. It carries you. It sustains you. So take a moment and ask yourself honestly, what is the deeper purpose behind your goal? What does it really mean to you? How does it connect with your values, your passions, or your desire to make a meaningful impact? The more clearly you can answer these questions, the more powerful your motivation becomes. And the more powerful your motivation, the easier it becomes to force yourself to take consistent action, especially when things get tough. Now let's explore another critical piece of the puzzle: your environment. You might not realize it, but your physical surroundings and social circle can either be your greatest ally or your biggest enemy when it comes to self-discipline. Unfortunately, most people underestimate just how much their environment shapes their behavior. Think about it. If you're trying to eat healthier, but your pantry is filled with cookies, chips, and soda, you're setting yourself up for failure. If your goal is to save money, but your weekends revolve around hanging out with friends who constantly pressure you to go shopping or dine out, your progress will stall. And if you're trying to build a business, but your workspace is chaotic, noisy, or full of interruptions, how will you stay focused? Here's the truth. Relying on willpower alone is a losing battle. But designing an environment that nudges you towards success, that's a game changer. Set yourself up for victory by making the right actions easier and the wrong actions harder. It's not about having more discipline. It's about needing less of it. Let me give you a simple but powerful example. I worked with a man who struggled with late-night snacking. All day, he stuck to his meal plan. But after dinner, temptation always hit. His solution? He simply stopped keeping snacks at home. If he wanted something, he had to put on clothes, get in the car, and drive to the store. That extra friction, those few added steps, were usually enough to stop the craving. Another client of mine, a consultant, found himself losing hours each day to email and social media. He'd sit down to do deep work, but distractions kept creeping in. So he installed website blockers that activated during his peak productivity hours. The result? Focus became easier. Distractions became less accessible. And with that, he began to take control of his time and his goals. Small changes to your environment can lead to massive changes in your behavior. So take inventory. What around you is helping you? What's holding you back? And what can you adjust today to support the version of you that takes action consistently? Your social environment is just as critical as your physical one. The people you spend time with will either elevate your standards or gradually lower them. They'll either support your goals or sabotage them, sometimes without even realizing it. So, ask yourself, who are you surrounding yourself with? Are they challenging you to grow or giving you permission to stay comfortable? I once worked with a young entrepreneur who joined a mastermind group of high-performing business owners. Almost immediately, his perspective shifted. What he used to think was a hard day's work now seemed minimal compared to the hustle and commitment of his peers. No one told him he needed to do more. They didn't have to. Just being in that new environment naturally pushed him to raise his game. His perception of what was normal and acceptable changed, and so did his performance. Let's explore another compelling tool to help you force yourself into consistent action: public commitment. When you publicly declare your intentions, you create a form of social accountability, and that accountability can become a powerful motivator, especially on days when your inner drive starts to waver. You feel a sense of responsibility not just to yourself, but to others. That external pressure can keep you moving forward when internal motivation fades. Now, to be fair, there is a nuance here. Research shows that sometimes announcing your goals publicly can backfire. It can give you a false sense of progress, a premature feeling of accomplishment before you've actually done the work. But for goals that require sustained effort over weeks or months, public commitment can be a game changer. I once coached a woman who had tried and failed multiple times to train for a marathon. Each time, she'd lose steam after a few weeks. But this time, she took a new approach. She didn't keep her goal private. Instead, she told everyone, her friends, her family, even her coworkers. She launched a blog to track her training journey. She even pledged to raise funds for a cause she cared deeply about, with donations tied to her completing the race. Now, skipping a workout didn't just mean letting herself down. It meant letting down people who believed in her, who donated to her cause, who were following her journey. That accountability gave her the fuel to keep going through the cold mornings, the sore muscles, and the self-doubt. And when race day came, she crossed the finish line with pride. That's the power of strategic public commitment. When used wisely, it can transform your discipline into something that's no longer just about willpower. It becomes about integrity, consistency, and honoring your word. When I asked her what made this time different, her answer was simple but powerful. I didn't give myself an out. By telling everyone what I was doing, I backed myself into a corner. The only way out was through. That mindset shift made all the difference. Sometimes forcing yourself to succeed means removing the escape routes. No plan B, just forward. Let's talk about another powerful strategy that helps you force yourself: making a meaningful investment in your goal. When you put something valuable on the line, your time, your money, your reputation, you automatically increase your level of commitment. You stop treating your goal like a hobby and start treating it like a non-negotiable. I once knew a man who had been trying to learn Spanish for years. He bought books, downloaded apps, even watched Spanish language TV shows. But nothing stuck. He never forced himself to stay consistent. Then one day, he made a bold move. He booked a non-refundable flight to Spain and arranged to live with a host family who spoke zero English. Suddenly, the stakes were real. He had no choice but to study hard. Every day, he forced himself to practice, to struggle, to improve. Why? Because now the consequences of failing weren't theoretical. They were real, and real consequences drive real results. I've seen this same principle in business. One client of mine wanted to expand into a new market but kept hesitating. He'd dip his toe in, run small tests, hesitate, then pull back. I challenged him to commit fully, rent a physical office, hire local talent, put his company's name on the building. That financial and reputational investment changed everything. Suddenly, he was all in. Challenges he once backed away from, now he pushed through them. Because when you've invested heavily, giving up just isn't an option anymore. You find a way. Now let's address a common misconception: that if you're forcing yourself to do something, you can't possibly enjoy it. That pushing yourself and enjoying the journey are somehow at odds. But that's not true. Yes, the act of forcing yourself, especially at the beginning, can feel uncomfortable, even painful. But once you get in motion, once you're in the flow, the discomfort often fades. And over time, something amazing happens. What started as pure discipline becomes genuine enjoyment, fulfillment, even love. I remember speaking with a world-class concert pianist about her practice routine. At first, practicing for hours each day felt like a grind. It took force, willpower, discipline. But eventually, those same hours became a source of peace and joy, a space where she felt alive and in control. In the next section, we'll explore how He once told me, "There are days when I absolutely have to force myself to sit at the piano. But the moment my fingers touch the keys, something changes. I find my rhythm. I reconnect with the music. The force is what gets me to the piano. But the music, it's what keeps me there." Isn't that how it works in so many parts of life? The initial push, the discipline, the effort, it's what gets you started. But once you're immersed in the work, once you're engaged, something shifts. That activity, which once felt heavy, can suddenly become light. The force opens the door. The momentum carries you through. And if you stay with it long enough, what once felt like a struggle transforms in a flow. Here's the key. Don't wait until you feel excited or inspired. Don't wait until something feels easy or enjoyable, because that moment may never come on its own. Instead, force yourself to begin and let the enjoyment reveal itself through the process. That's how mastery is built. That's where fulfillment is born, not in waiting, but in doing. Now, let me share something deeper about success. Success isn't some final destination you arrive at. It's not a trophy you put on a shelf. It's a living, breathing process. A rhythm of continually setting new goals, summoning the discipline to take action, achieving, and then starting again. Again and again. The moment you stop pushing yourself to grow, the moment you stop creating new challenges, is the moment your progress begins to stall. I've met countless people who reached a major milestone, graduated, got promoted, built a business, and then let themselves drift. Their skills dulled, their fire dimmed, their confidence faded. Why? Because they stopped stretching themselves. Don't let that happen to you. Every achievement should become a launch pad, a reason to ask what's next. Keep setting new targets. Keep raising your standard. Keep forcing yourself to break through new ceilings. I once had a conversation with a very successful businessman who put it perfectly. He said, "The biggest threat to my growth isn't failure. It's success. When I fail, I'm hungry. But when I succeed, I get comfortable. And that's when I'm most at risk." That's why he developed a habit. Before he finished one big goal, he already had the next one lined up. That simple practice kept him moving, kept him growing, and most importantly, kept his internal drive alive. In the next section, we'll explore how to sustain that fire over the long haul. Because learning to force yourself isn't just a one-time act. It's a mindset, a lifestyle, a lifelong advantage. Now let's talk about something that often gets overlooked, but is absolutely critical. The role of recovery in the process of forcing yourself. At first, it might sound counterintuitive. After all, we often associate discipline with constant effort, pushing nonstop. But here's the truth. Without proper rest, sustained discipline becomes impossible. Burnout isn't a sign of dedication. It's the enemy of long-term success. Think of your discipline like a muscle. When you train a muscle, you actually create tiny tears in the fibers. But growth doesn't happen during the workout. It happens in recovery. The same principle applies to your willpower, your focus, and your internal drive. You need cycles of effort and renewal. Push, then rest. Focus, then recharge. I worked with an executive who wore his overwork like a badge of honor. He regularly clocked 80-hour weeks, operated on minimal sleep, and pushed through sheer exhaustion. But something strange started happening. His productivity dropped. His thinking slowed. His health declined. Despite all the forcing, he was getting less done and feeling worse. So he made a simple but powerful shift. He began taking regular breaks throughout his day. He set a firm boundary for when work ended each evening. He reclaimed his weekends and scheduled real vacations where work was completely off limits. What happened next surprised him. His focus during work hours sharpened. His creativity skyrocketed. He got more done in fewer hours. Why? Because he was no longer forcing against his biology, he was working with it. So don't mistake nonstop effort for strength. Strategic recovery isn't a luxury, it's a tool. It's what allows you to summon the force you need when it matters most. Rest isn't weakness, it's preparation. Now, let me introduce you to one of the most powerful tools I've ever shared, the concept of pre-deciding. This single idea has changed lives. Pre-deciding means making decisions ahead of time, before you're in the heat of the moment. Why is that important? Because when you're tired, stressed, or tempted, your willpower is weakest. But when you've already decided in advance how you'll act in those moments, you take the pressure off. You don't need to negotiate with yourself. You simply follow through. Think of it like setting up a mental contract. When this situation happens, I will do this. It removes uncertainty and strengthens your commitment. And in many cases, that clarity is all you need to keep moving forward. Take exercise, for example. Instead of waking up each morning and debating whether or not you'll work out, you make a pre-decision. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are non-negotiable workout days. That decision is already made. It doesn't depend on your mood, the weather, or your schedule. It just is. Or when you're at a social event and the temptation to indulge arises, instead of deciding in the moment, you pre-commit 2 drinks max, no exceptions. And when it comes to your goals, especially when you're tired or stressed, you don't leave it up to chance. You pre-decide 1 hour of focused effort every single day, no matter how you feel. This kind of pre-deciding is powerful because it eliminates the exhausting back and forth that saps your energy. You're no longer negotiating with yourself in real time. The hard part, the decision, has already been made. All that remains is execution. I once worked with a woman who struggled deeply with saying no. Every time someone asked for her time or help, Even if it pulled her away from her priorities, she felt compelled to say yes. And every time, she ended up feeling overwhelmed and resentful. So we created a simple pre-decision rule. If the request didn't align with her top 3 personal or professional priorities, her answer would be a polite but firm no. At first, this was uncomfortable. She worried about disappointing others. But over time, it became liberating. The pre-decision gave her clarity. It empowered her to protect her time and energy. And most importantly, it helped her force herself to honor her goals. So if you want to make forcing yourself easier, take the time to pre-decide. Build clear, specific rules that support your highest values. And then live by them. Thank you for being here today. I hope this message inspires you to take control, build momentum, and move closer to the life you truly want. Wishing you strength, joy, and great health. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel, Mindset Daily, for more powerful insights.